Right, we're going to have a look at data again, which is increasingly interchangeable with tech and innovation. First up, we've got a solo slot, and this is from Ant Morse, who's Head of Innovation at Virgin Media O2. And Ant is going to give us a futurist's view of how advances in technology and innovation may transform societal trends and the future of transport. So data, Ant says, will become our guide as we navigate the future of travel. So please welcome Ant Morse.
Well, we're now into afternoon, so I think I'm keeping you from lunch. But thanks for bringing me along today. As mentioned, I'm Ant Morse. I'm going to be looking at various different ways of data and the future of technology. So, first of all, we are living through a history lesson of the future. The future is going to transform how we see technology in years to come. And sorry, could I just have my speaker notes on this screen? Would that be possible? Thank you. So we're living through a history lesson of the future. This lesson is where teachers are going to talk to children in years to come around how a pandemic and how new technology changed how we lived and worked forever. But what does the future hold for us? What does our future look like? Well, I'm going to look today at some of the obvious and the not so obvious things, but collectively some of the very powerful drivers for change. But before you hear from me, I want to take us back in time to hear from somebody else from their today talking about our tomorrow. Mr. Arthur C. Clarke from 1964.
But what about the city of the day after tomorrow? Say the year 2000. I think it would be completely different. In fact, it may not even exist at all. Oh, I'm not thinking of the atom bomb and the next Stone Age. I'm thinking of the incredible breakthrough which has been made possible by developments in communications, particularly the transistor and, above all, the communications satellite. These things will make possible a world in which we can be in instant contact with each other, wherever we may be, where we can contact our friends anywhere on Earth, even if we don't know their actual physical location. It will be possible in that age, perhaps only 50 years from now, for a man to conduct his business from Tahiti or Bali just as well as he could from London. In fact, if it proved worthwhile, almost any executive skill, any administrative skill, even any physical skill, could be made independent of distance. I am perfectly serious when I suggest that one day we may have brain surgeons in Edinburgh operating on patients in New Zealand. When that time comes, the whole world will have shrunk to a point, and the traditional role of the city as a meeting place for men would have ceased to make any sense. In fact, men will no longer commute, they will communicate. They won't have to travel for business anymore, they'll only travel for pleasure. I only hope that when that day comes, and when the city is abolished, the whole world isn't turned into one giant suburb.
Can you imagine being in an audience such as this, listening to that in 1964? Would we have raised an eyebrow? Maybe we would have looked at our phones, had they been invented by then, and thought, what am I doing here? Now's the time for a fire alarm. But ultimately, what he went on to describe there is pretty much the world we live in today. Now, he did get a couple of bits wrong. I'm not sure I agree with his views of the city into a giant suburb, but he also mentioned that we would conduct brain surgery between Edinburgh and New Zealand. In actual fact, that was carried out in 2 states in southern China. And he mentioned that we'd get to Tahiti and Bali. Now, I'm not sure about yourselves, but during lockdown, I made it to Blackpool and Bridlington. So we didn't quite have that glamour that he dictates there. But ultimately, my point in sharing this video is that we've got to expect the unexpected. You know, what he saw there was sci-fi at the time, but it became now-fi of today. So what of our today? What are we going to go next? What does our next 60 years look like? And there's no crystal ball, right? So we're going to have to use our thoughts, our research and data to make that right. Now, we could start by looking at the past. We hear that robots are going to take our jobs. AI is everywhere. It's in every conversation I think we've heard throughout the conference so far. And if we look to the past, it's not the first time that technology has replaced labour, whether it's the mills of the 1800s or the production lines of the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. If we look now to how 5G is transforming industrial environments and automating factories today, we don't have to look too far, really. The phones in our pocket really tell us that we've come an awful long way. I guess really every industry, whether it's computerization, Moore's law, or just natural progress, and we're going to enter that again with AI, every industry is impacted by those technologies. But change is constant, right? It's throughout history. There's no way we can avoid it. It's going to happen. It's simply our time. But the reason I wanted to speak today is to explain that our time is going to be slightly different. It's going to be fast. Yes, technology was already progressing, and the COVID accelerated into that step change. But we are really moving into that next phase. Very busy graph, forgive me. But previously, throughout history, technology has evolved at a fairly linear pace. It's allowed us to make gradual adjustments as organizations. We're oil tankers adjusting our course. Then as we get to the kind of third stage of the Industrial Revolution, we start to see that acceleration, Moore's law, computerization, starting to accelerate things. And then we move to where we are today, to this exponential growth of technology, and even technology developing itself. We've moved from oil tankers now to speedboats. As organizations and individuals as well, we have to chop and change to keep up. But what do we need to consider next? Where do we plan? Where do we plan as individuals and as organizations? Well, we've heard about AI and chat and natural large language models throughout the conference yesterday and today. We could ask them. Ultimately, they are using vast lakes of data. So they could give us some pretty accurate and scarily close predictions as to what we should be looking at. But I think we need to be slightly wider in our view. We need to consider the technologies that will progress, and especially in transport. My son pulled down the drive the other day, and I said, wind your window down. So he wound his window down and went, what's wrong with your hand, Dad? It's kind of looking at the proof point of technology changing, whether we like it or not. And new generations will not understand our ways of working previously. We've got to look at those technologies then driving societal transformation, ourselves as the best example through COVID. We've changed completely what we do and how we do it. And those two combined are going to make an impact on our economic landscape that I predict is potentially going to be bigger than anything we could possibly imagine today. This is going to be our big transformation for the future. So let's start with technology. Let's look through these. So tech, we expect, is going to evolve. We're going to see fabulous and incredible advancements and innovation. Innovators will keep innovating. Entrepreneurs will keep embracing the opportunities to capture that. And it's not only going to be fast, but it's going to be pretty incredible, really, as well. If we think to our cities, our worlds are going to become, and not just cities, but countries, are going to become hyper-connected. 5G technologies are going to move to 6G technologies, and more things in our locations are going to be digitized and connected. And really, these cities then will, and these locations will come to life. There's this invisible layer of data that is all around us in this room, in Birmingham itself. And it's when these worlds overlap that we're going to start accessing that digital information in new ways. Glass is going to move us from what was our first field of notification to our second field of notification, but now to our third field of notification as we see information appear in our peripheral vision. And this is going to start the hottest battle in marketing ever, and that is for this constant field of vision in our glass. Marketeers will embrace this, innovators will embrace this, and imagine doing a search on your mobile phone. You have a choice, have a range of options. Slightly more limited if you do it on your watch, but it's very precise if you do it on glass. So it's going to start this huge focus and transformation of how we search. We're also going to see variations of these technologies adapt and evolve, and we already have very well-established services, but these are going to allow us to meet and collaborate and come together and work in new ways. Ultimately, they'll allow us to finally travel without moving. And if we look to that travel, well, actually, are we going to travel in the same way? If we've got all this technology at our fingertips, and if it evolves at such a rapid pace, will we change our attitudes to it? We've already seen through COVID that actually there's different ways to do it. The 9 to 5 is close to 100 years old, and really, we've now found that we can do things in different ways. Society is now breaking some of the old habits And ultimately, we're enjoying the benefits. We're trying to get fitter. We're having more time for us. We're coming together better as families. And a constant theme throughout the conference has been around decarbonisation and the planet. You know, this is, as individuals and as organisations, we have a responsibility as well as targets to really transform. I think for me, really, the change was required and the timing is just right. But while we obsess, and the headlines obsess about people returning to the office and the role of the city moving forward, remote working isn't for everybody. It doesn't work for everybody. Lockdown proved we had the tech, but actually then the realities and practicalities are very different. And ultimately, it's no substitute for coming together, to collaborate as teams, to meet in events and conferences such as this, to socialise and collaborate is very important. But it's not just our preferences. Okay, we have a view and a history and we can look back, but actually now we've got 4 generations in the workforce, all with different views, better informed, you could certainly better connected, and they want to live in different ways. If we think about the generations that are here now, we've also got one on its way that will have little regard for what we do. They'll have no interest in old ways of working. They will come with new ideas and new expectations. And ultimately, this is a generation that will want services tailored for them. They'll want to be known. They'll share data to be known, predicted, entertained, loved. And they'll do it now. It'll be the now generation. And ultimately, I think collectively with these points, we are on the cusp of considerable change. And if it's technology that was the vehicle that drove us here and innovators are the fuel that have given us these wonderful applications, the next step is going to be society. It's going to be us that drive that next step of change. But it's going to be coupled with one other thing, and that's this economic transformation. And this is a trend which I believe is going to completely transform our lives and certainly the lives of future generations. I think it was mentioned in the next panel, you know, we are planning for customer of tomorrow, future generations. This trend is going to change it. I'm going to call this trend life as a service. And this really is a transformation beyond anything we could probably imagine today. And I want you to think about your banking application. Consider the growing number of direct debits that are leaving your account and digital fees and digital services. If you have children, you can treble that because they're just coming from absolutely everywhere. And it's whether it's our TV streaming or our doorbells, more things are now being provided as services. And it's all just for a few pounds a month, right? So we can have all of these things. And if we look at the background of this, from my research, this is no mistake. Okay, this is not just somebody has put that service in play. Investors, venture capitalists, investing in startups are favouring these models of as a service because ultimately they can grow sales faster. They can have stronger valuations on the back of a continuous annuity subscription model. So they favour these. So if you're in the startup territory, you're better off with the service as a service to get the backing from the investors in the first place. And if we think about ourselves, you know, life's getting more expensive, right? Whether it's the cost of living, increased fuel, you know, we haven't got heaps of cash lying around. So actually, we as society favour these models as well. Because ultimately then we can have it all, right? But as a service. And as a result, it's going to move every industry to as a service where possible. That is, models, organisations will no longer compete just with themselves. In time, younger generations will enter the marketplace in slightly different ways. So when it comes to home ownership, they'll rent everything from the home, the sofa, the TV they watch, the clothes they wear, the food in the fridge, the wine delivered to the door, even the flowers in the vase will be provided as a service. And I'm not telling you anything new. These services are all here right now. People will ultimately own much less, but they'll have much more. And I've mentioned, you know, there isn't heaps of cash lying around. There isn't endless pots of money. So the good thing for us is these services will be brilliant because they'll have to be, right? Otherwise, we won't pay for them. Or competition will drive the one that is brilliant to be the one that you use. It's got to be worthy of that slot on our bank statements. Now, as mentioned, this will bring considerable change. Why do I think that? Well, I think as interest rates will rise and fall, the cost of fuel will go up and down, competition and increased new entrants will always drive value. But life as a service will only go one way. It will become more expensive. It will potentially it has the potential to transform faster than banks can change and adjust mortgage criteria. It will test our pensions, which were designed for times way before any of this was even there. And as a consequence of that, it will nibble away at future generational wealth transfer. So it's going to have the seed of significant change. And what I would say is, as from my research, it's that moment of the future will favour the prepared and will challenge the unprepared. So as individuals, it's time we look at these trends and pay close attention. So how do we plan for these areas? Well, from the tech we use, that's going to happen anyway, right? So it's about watching that and testing and trialing and looking at the innovation. The societal transformation is the bit we need to, chat isn't necessarily going to give us that answer. AI may need that human impact here. And ultimately, we need to consider the future financial models of our customers as well. Well, what do? Well, there's no sat-nav for the future, sadly. We don't know the shortcuts it's going to take. We've no idea of the speed limits. It's up to us. But this room and this conference and this industry are the people that are going to dictate it. We will shape the future of transport together. So we could bring lines of Arthur C. Clarke's and the likes of myself as futurists along stage and give you our views, our opinions, and hopefully give some thought-provoking considerations. But I think that would be slightly tricky to build a business plan on opinion and ideas. I think they're important, but I think there's a stronger way. And it's as W. Edward Deming said, in God We Trust, all others must bring data. Data is going to be our best answer, our best guide and coach throughout this. And we've heard from the panelists in the session earlier today, we see this data, but is it being used? Our cities are generating vast amounts of data. As mentioned, it's that invisible layer that's all around us. What could we learn from 5 minutes ago, from real time, from right now, from yesterday, from last week, last year, 2 years ago? How do we actually use it? We generate all this data, but we're not using it. Again, I think it's come up a few times throughout the conference. 90% of data collected is not even viewed, let alone used in any anger. But yeah, if you think back to those younger generations expecting to be predicted, loved, known, remembered, served, we're not actually aware of what they want in the first place. So we have a generation that is coming through that wants to share data, but we need to now start to use that. And use it with more interest as well. It is the best insight we have. It's the best map that we can navigate. We've got to explore it. We've got to test the thinking. But coupled with those societal trends as well, analyze it, model it, test it, forecast it. And it was definitely mentioned in the earlier session as well, is around collaborate. None of us is as smart as all of us. We have our own data sets, which are very useful, and they have a value, I'm sure. But actually, what is the value to the end user, to your customer, if we collaborate some of those data sets together? How can it be better used? Where can we use the AI? And ultimately, where can we use the common sense? Where can we do what AI will never be able to do, which is apply the human edge? This is the bit where, the intelligent minds and brilliant thinkers in your organizations can get hold of that data, but with a far wider view, considering the societal impacts and the technology, and then really ask the constant whats and whys, test where AI isn't possible. So I think the future will really be predicted and built by those that can read data. It's as simple as that. So, to close, whatever it is, it's going to be fast. We're going to have to put our seatbelts on, and we'll either, like the Arthur C. Clarke video, we'll raise an eyebrow of speculation, a grin of optimism, a degree of concern, I'm sure. But either way, we will be that history lesson. We are the class of 2023, and the content and the future we build will be the content of that lesson, and I think it's going to be one heck of a ride. So, thank you very much.